The first ever season of OWCS has come and gone, and with it means a time for reflection as we look towards the future in Season 2, which is literally just around the corner. And as per request on Twitter a while back, today I'm going to give you my top 10 favorite matches of OWCS Season 1 across the various regions. And yes, this is strictly from my point of view. I don't give a damn about what you think is objectively better than what I have on here. This is just my personal opinion on the games I enjoyed the most. So I hope you guys enjoy, and I encourage you to leave your own list down in the comments below. Starting off at number 10 is one that I think goes a bit under the radar, and that'll be Yeti versus OWCS in their seeding decider match in the Korea Stage 1 tournament. The game didn't have the highest stakes or anything like that, but Yeti were technically the first team to deliver a loss to OWCS/Crazy Raccoon, and it came in this random match out of nowhere. Yeti, at the time, they had just barely gotten top 4, and we were wondering if they could really punch above their weight class, and they went on a pretty generational run in this seeding decider by playing some unbelievable Overwatch against Korea's Big 3, and almost defeating all of them. Like, it was some pretty crazy stuff. In this OWCS game in particular, they managed to be successful. They threw them off with a very fast-paced dive, not to mention an absolutely insane performance from Viper. This was a legacy game out of him, and it certainly is a big reason why it was so entertaining. The way he played on Tracer was absolutely absurd. Rising up to the occasion, challenging Lip and Heesang the way he did, absolutely insane stuff. And it just made this Yeti underdog story/legend grow even more. This was a big one for why they're one of the more fun teams to watch in Korea, why they lasted. Between Viper having an out-of-body experience on Tracer, and Donghak continuing his redemption arc by playing some absolutely insane dive on the likes of Winston and Doom, we had one of the most entertaining matches of the entire season, and the very early start of it, and I'd say that it was a pretty big surprise, just knowing how good OWCS/Crazy Raccoon were playing at the time. There's so many things that make this game interesting. The legacy games, the storylines, the shock factor, really good game overall. At number 9, I'm going with Crazy Raccoon versus FTG/Zeta Division in the Stage 1 Asia playoffs. Another game that didn't end in a 3-2 scoreline or anything, didn't go the distance like in the first entry, but the thing about this game was it felt like every map was heavily contested. You had Crazy Raccoon staying on their toes the entire time, in danger of losing pretty early on in this tournament. And then you have FTG, on the other hand, who were this team who could never seem to beat Falcons or Crazy Raccoon all that often, but they almost always kept it close with them, and this was just a prime example. I mean, you really can't make it up. I kind of feel bad for how close and yet so far it always felt like they were, but every single map in the series was awesome. Coliseo was like a 1 meter difference. Saravasa went the maximum number of rounds. And then you have Shambhala. That was like the biggest peak of the series. It's not always remembered the most fondly in the eyes of fans, because if it weren't for Flora messing up that Bob, they probably could have won that map and continued the series for at least one more map at the very least. But I think that's part of why I enjoyed it and why it is so memorable, because it had such a crucial moment where the decision, where the placement of an ultimate was just a little bit off, and that was ultimately the thing that costed them a series. I think it's fun to look back at these things historically. You can point to moments like that and say, this is why Zeta Division could never get it done, you know? I don't know, maybe it's just me. For a lot of people, I know it's going to be the opposite, where it pisses them off, but I like looking back at things like this, and it was definitely a series to remember. Moving on to the number 8 spot, we have Zeta Division versus Crazy Raccoon in the recent Korea decider match. It may seem a bit cheesy to have the same teams going head-to-head in 2 straight entries like this, but this is just another game that I remember pretty fondly, knowing the storyline behind it. At this point in time, Crazy Raccoon still had not dropped a single map in all of Korea Stage 2. They were looking to obtain perfection heading into the final stretch in the tournament bracket. And I'd say most fans during this time really thought they were going to do it. With how dominant they had been throughout the entire round-robin portion of this thing, with how they destroyed the top teams like Falcons and Zeta Division as well, No one thought they had a chance. It really seemed like it was going to happen. But then on this fateful match on September 1st, everything changed when Zeta Division decided enough is enough. What would ensue was an absolutely ridiculous back and forth series. Zeta Division finally got that map in Circuit Royale, and they were able to keep that momentum, keep their confidence going as the two teams traded over and over again. It seemed like Crazy Raccoon were winning some maps convincingly, but then Zeta Division with a strong mental would fight right back. Able to take Circuit, able to take a King's Row in extra rounds. Not to mention, the pacing was absolutely perfect on Survasa, going the maximum number of rounds after this crazy back and forth series. It was just the perfect way for it to end, even though Crazy Raccoon did come out on top and we didn't get that special underdog story. At my number 7 spot, I've got another Zeta Division game, this time versus Falcons in the most recent clash between the two in the Asia Stage 2 lower bracket final. Take everything I said with the previous entry and like quadruple the intensity. The stakes don't get any higher than this. Whoever wins this game is going on to Stockholm, Sweden alongside Crazy Raccoon. This is Zeta's last chance, their final opportunity to get out of third wheel hell and join a top tier team and play in an international event like they all deserve to. We're waiting to see if they can take that last step. And unfortunately, they came up short yet again here, but the series just felt so tense knowing what was on the line. We saw some legacy games from a bunch of players on both sides. I mean, just with the way Proper was playing alone, it was like, god damn, this is generational. This dude is tired of coming up short. He's ready to win a chip. And you think about how important this was for Fielder and Chio and also Stalker as well after what happened on Atlanta Reign the year before. This was just such an important game for all of them in their legacies, and Zeta Division made sure they earned it with the likes of Alpha Yi going crazy on the Genji, and just knowing this team very well. This was both sides knowing damn well that this is a series they could win, and in the end, when it came to the execution in the final moment, Falcons were able to take it after a ridiculous session of extra rounds on Rialto. Just an absolutely beautiful game and one of the best ones on the year by far. At my number 6 spot, I'm going with the Toronto Defiant versus NRG Stage 3 Upper Bracket Finals in North America. Finally, a non-Korean game makes the list. I knew this one had to be on here somewhere, just wasn't sure if it should be super high or super low. Ultimately decided on somewhere in the middle would be the best. And I mean, this game was just a pleasant surprise, right? With how dominant Toronto Defiant usually were in North America, there weren't many expectations that they'd actually lose many games at all, especially after the choke against M80, what was it, in like the Stage 2 upper bracket final, whatever it was. We didn't think it actually would happen again, especially against an NRG team who was kind of struggling up until this point with some new members of the roster added into the mix. We all kind of thought that they'd get stomped by Toronto, knowing how the group stage went, but here they came out of nowhere after going down 2-0 and pulling off the impossible. And I mean, with the way the series started, it really felt like this one wouldn't be a contest. The Shambali Monastery map was so winnable, but they managed to get fuller health. At that point, it felt like the series was all over. It'd just be Toronto beating up everyone as per usual, but no. Then all of a sudden, these guys locked in. I mean, geez, man, at one point, Toronto had a 70-meter lead on Runasapi. It really felt like this series was over, but then some kind of switch just, I don't know, it flipped, and Kellen was doing whatever he wanted to. Toronto weren't punishing him. He had an absolutely insane match the rest of the way through. They started hitting all their shots, and all of a sudden, things started to snowball very quickly. And then on Blizzard World, man, that was probably the most iconic map of the whole series, in my opinion. One that you're going to remember for a very long time. And it has to do with so many different players and their combined efforts, right? PGE with some hero plays on Widowmaker. You have Cal just absolutely popping off on Alari, looking like one of the best in the entire league on her. And on top of it all, you sub an attack after Kellen had been playing well, and he picks up exactly where his tank partner left off by playing some absolutely great diva when it mattered, especially on the defense. It went to show the true potential of this team as they brought it all the way back after going down 2-0 in really sad fashion, and then by that point, all the momentum was in their favor, and they won Survasa pretty easily. There's more talent out there outside of Toronto Defiant that deserves to have the spotlight on them. This roster, everybody got to contribute. It went to show their ceiling's actually really high, and it was just a preview of what was to come after what happened in Stockholm and everything. It was beautiful. At number 5, I'm going with Falcons versus Crazy Raccoon in the Dallas Finals. This one wasn't as close as some of the other matches we've seen them play and everything, but this one was still pretty special. It was on land in an international environment. It was clearly the two best teams going head-to-head. Falcons had just beaten them the day before in the upper bracket final. Crazy Raccoon was looking for some revenge, and ultimately we got a pretty fun back-and-forth series. The thing that ultimately made the series the most enjoyable, though, was how Crazy Raccoon went about winning it with their game planning and decision-making and composition choice. At this point in time, it was all about Mauga meta, and as we all know, whenever this guy is meta, it is extremely boring to watch him. And Crazy Raccoon knew they were worse than Falcons in this mirror because of the day before, so they went out there and they did their own thing. They were able to get Falcons to somewhat play their game. They forced dive. Lip was able to play great on Tracer in some pretty meaningful situations. Junbin showed an array of different heroes, and he was great at all of them. Going from the Mauga to Wrecking Ball on multiple maps, making that work in such a critical situation. Not to mention the crazy Roadhog composition they played on Oasis City Center. Extremely unexpected, and just crazy with how successful it ended up being. Even though they won so much this year, Crazy Raccoon were just a super enjoyable team to watch because of things like this. Having your own unique style and identity, finding solutions to win the game instead of forcing things you aren't as good at, it was great to see, and it felt like everybody was a major contributor in this game. Honestly, on both sides, it was pretty intense. The trade-off between Proper and Stalker versus Heesang and Lip, it was sick. Everybody was making plays, yet Heesang with his heroics on the Venture, Lip on Tracer and Hitscan, Junbin, like I said before, just an epic series overall, and I'm glad the more fun team at that point in time was able to get the win. Number 4 is going to be the Toronto Defiant versus Nightmare Stage 4 Finals. The thing that made this game so interesting and so enjoyable to me was just how Nightmare was able to establish some kind of late season rivalry with Toronto Defiant. They kept both games close with them in this NA Stage 4 tournament, and in this one in particular, it felt like they were so close to victory. I mean, they're one sugar-free deflect Genji clutch away from potentially winning this and making Toronto finish second for the first time ever. This team developed at such a quick rate, and they were confident enough to play such a strong team at the highest level possible. And what I love was, it wasn't super cheesy, you know? It didn't feel kind of fluky like in the NRG game where Toronto got on their own heads. This was just two good teams going head-to-head, going blow for blow in a series full of clutch. This is the first time where it felt like Toronto got pushed in a non-weird way, if that makes any sense. Just good quality Overwatch, not a lot of horrid mistakes going on, not any terrible coaching or decision-making, just two great teams trying to win the title. This was honest Overwatch at the end of the day, and that's all you can really ask for. And we saw Nightmare get one map away. They had Toronto on the brink. Something that no other team could do in a stage final in North America. They were up 3-2 against the back-to-back-to-back-to-back champions of the region. And that's just something that you've got to sit there and appreciate, right? Every time Nightmare played Toronto this year, it was always close. They're one of the only teams that could do such a thing. Nightmare brought needed life to a region that was otherwise seen as the most boring and lopsided of all. Something about watching Sugar Free go off with that clutch on Lijiang was special. Just knowing that I've been a fan of him for so long, it was great to see that. This was the stuff that we were hoping to see when he got a bit older after his initial start on Atlanta Academy. You had Merit showing why Toronto brought him on as an inboard as well, with just some absolutely absurd plays in this series. But then on the other side, you think about Infected, Seeker, even Zera as well. It was just a special series to watch, and it made NA kind of boost themselves, rise up their stonks, heading into Stockholm, and then we saw what happened after that. Now for the top 3, where maybe some of my picks will be a bit controversial, at least in terms of the order. Starting off at number 3, I'm going with SSG versus ENCE in the Stage 2 EMEA Finals. This one I hold pretty near and dear to my heart, not just because it was an epic comeback in a final situation, but because I was able to watch it live with a lot of people from the community on my stream. It just added on to it. We were all sitting there thinking SSG was done for after that fourth map. It really seemed like it was over, but then they locked in and they started to play a lot better. They made some on-the-fly strategy adjustments, but also, you gotta give a major shout out to Sparker and to Psycho for playing out of their minds in the second half of this series. Psycho in particular, I was extremely proud of because he was playing at the level of Kevster. He was matching that guy on Tracer blow for blow, and needless to say, that is not an easy task, and it goes beyond just EU players. In general, some of the best players in the world are going to have a hard time matching somebody like Kevster on his signature hero, but Psycho managed to do it time after time in this series. And how about Sparker, who played at an MVP level in this series? You think about how he disrupted that Sigma Bastion comp with the Ashe, the Dynamite got crazy value, or how he started to do the individual hero plays, going on the flanks as Cassidy, especially in that Samoa section. It was absolutely insane, and this was the Sparker that a lot of people were hoping we'd see at some point. I remember scouting him back in the day, looking at his tape for contenders as he was heading on to the London Spitfire in 2021 and saying to myself, this guy could be something special. And now, 3 years later, we got to see that in real time, what he can be when unleashing his true untapped potential. And there's just something about watching SSG, those last couple of maps, making those adjustments on the fly, and in the end, we'd see a lot of zeros on the board for ENCE when it came to the map score. Although in spite of that, it still felt like a lot of these maps were absurdly close, like with Root and Junkertown. It was a really intense match all around, even if the score may not suggest it if you look at some of the main details. This series was great. It was such an awesome comeback, and this was a battle of probably the two favorite EU teams, I'd say, on the year. One of the only ones we really got in the finals that felt close, and it was pretty enjoyable. And we're actually going to stay on EU as we head into the number 2 spot, believe it or not, because I'm putting down Virtus Pro versus Twisted Minds in the EMEA Stage 4 Loser Semifinals. It may seem weird to have two of the more obscure teams on here, especially this high up, but if you watched this game live, then you know why it was so great. I mean, we had some of the highest stakes of all. It's another game where whoever wins this game is likely going to Stockholm. Virtus Pro just need to get this W, and they can pull off the super funny thing, the funniest thing ever, and have Twisted Minds not go after their great start. But they came up short in what ended up being probably one of my favorite games in a very long time. And believe me, the series did not start off very hot. I mean, it was 2-0 in very convincing fashion for Twisted Minds, but then VP locked in, they remembered what was on the line, and what would ensue in the second half of the series was some of the most insane Overwatch I have seen this season. Esperanza, they were able to jolt themselves back to life, and then what happened on King's Row and Rialto, man, I mean, geez, we went to extra rounds on King's Row, essentially. VP basically finished the map 2 separate times. It was 6-5. It seemed like VP were in a great position to win that map very easily, but then Quartz had something to say about it with how he was playing on the Ashe. It was absurd to see. Like, any time it felt like VP had room to breathe, Twisted Minds just pulled random stuff out of their butt in that map. I could not believe what I was witnessing. Like, it should not have been that close, and yet Quartz willed his team to a potential win in a closeout in that moment. It wasn't enough, but the heroics were pretty absurd, and that continued right into Rialto, and I'd say for both sides. Again, you go into extra rounds, both teams managed to complete the map, neither one is backing down from this potential trip to DreamHack Sweden. Quartz and Shockwave are trading over and over again on Widow, both of them making some absurd plays, but in the end, Quartz just would not be denied. This man had an out-of-body experience on Widow in this final part of the map. Right when it seemed like Twisted Minds were down and out, they were able to stall out the cart, find the big picks, and win this game. I remember being on the edge of my seat in this one, like way more than some of the other top games on this list with some more relevant teams. There was just something about it. I think knowing what Twisted Minds went through, this idea of them not making it, in Virtus Pro story as well, and the whole Quartz thing and him not wanting to lose, It all just built upon the excitement and made for a game I'm definitely not going to forget anytime soon. I'll just tell you right now, that's one to go back and watch at some point. But it has nothing on the final game of this list, which beats all of the other ones combined by a country mile. At number 1, it's very obviously Falcons versus Crazy Raccoon in the Asia Stage 2 Finals. This was Game of the Year by far, and probably one of the best games I've ever seen in general in the history of Overwatch esports, and that's saying something because I've basically been around since the beginning. I've been very involved since 2017. So to say something like that, you know it's got to be a pretty good game, especially as a boomer like me who prefers the old stuff. This game was just awesome, man. It had everything you could want. I mean, it's in a LAN environment. You wish it could be for a serious championship. That probably would have added a plus. But aside from that, what else was it possibly missing? It went the distance. A 7-map series where 2 rivals are trying to achieve that top seed as we head into DreamHack Sweden. Both of them want to win this for the sake of pride, but you know what means just a little bit more on the side of Falcons, who have continuously played little brother to this Crazy Raccoon squad. Like I said a bit earlier in the video, you think about how important this is to make that final push to win a championship for so many of these players. Proper, after what he went through on San Francisco for a couple of seasons, Chio and Fielder after being very defeated in that Atlanta Reign playoff push the year before. It was so meaningful to those guys. They absolutely hate losing, and it's important for them to get this W so they can finally get that monkey off their back and be confident as they head into the final stretch, the final tournament of the year. And they were able to pull it off. On the brink, seemed like they might be done down 3-2, but they managed to figure it out. And it's all because of one man playing out of his mind when it really mattered. That being Proper. This was probably the best performance I've seen from him maybe ever, at least in a winning effort. There's been a lot of iconic Proper games, especially if you look back at OWL 2022 and maybe a little bit before that. But this one to me just meant a little bit more, knowing the history behind it and how some people were starting to blame him for not being as good as he used to be. This was just vintage Proper on the Genji. The amount of hero plays he made was ridiculous. This felt like Prime Proper, if not to an even more ascended level. This series had a little bit of everything between the story, the back and forths, top tier players showing up when it really mattered. It was just a lovely moment to see them both play at their max potential and for Falcons to overcome these guys in such an important moment for them. If they had lost this series, it could have sent them spiraling, as we've seen many other times throughout this year. It was this moment right here that allowed for the Falcons story arc to play out how it did after what happened in DreamHack Sweden and everything. I like to look back at this game as the main indicator for them to show that they really can do it, to prove to themselves. No team could ever seem to capture a real advantage in this series, and I think that's part of why I loved it so much. It starts off with Falcons getting a map win, then on Watch Point Gibraltar, we see the lip go off, and all of a sudden it goes back in their favor. And then Proper goes crazy on Renasapi to clutch out that map. Then we see Crazy Raccoon win a couple in a row. It seems like maybe they have the series. Then you have a super intense New Junk City where Proper refuses to lose. And then Ilios, which went to that third and final decisive round. I like to look back at that moment. I believe it was on Lighthouse. Falcons needed to stall for one last fight. You had the Echo dupe by Proper to touch point as Tracer, Stalker able to get a touch in as well, and then they turn it around with some critical kills when it matters to win that series. I mean, jeez, it had everything. It was a beautiful series, man, and this is one I will definitely be revisiting in the near future, because it genuinely might be one of my top 5 favorite Overwatch esports games of all time. It truly was that enjoyable, and it's going to go down in history as one of the best moments of this new era of Overwatch esports. With that said, that's going to do it. That is my top 10 favorite games for OWCS Season 1. Those were the best ones to me. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below and which games you enjoyed the most. And if you enjoyed this video, make sure to give it a like and subscribe to my channel if you're new for more OWCS content. Peace.